and teach the early child development program.
Thank you.
Hey, hi, I'm Sandy Wilberger. I'm here representing young children with disabilities from the Partnership with People with Disabilities, the TTACs, the Training and Technical Assistance.
Great.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Suarez from Creative Learning School and representing the private sector.
Wonderful.
Hi. Sorry. I'm Jennifer Parrish, and I'm the Executive Director of Peak Childhood Center, representing a nonprofit center. And I too started as a middle school social studies.
Explains so much.
So you can see Bridget.
Jean Wolford, Superintendent, Northern City School, adjunct professor for Mountain Empire Community College in these early childhood classes. And also my doctorate in early childhood, and that's my teaching background was pre-K and first grade.
And also probably gets the prize for furthest travel.
Yeah.
And I do want to shout out, I'm going totally rogue, but they are also the state's leading school division on chronic absenteeism and doing attendance right. And so you all know this from tuning into the early childhood commissions that we still have a lot of chronic absenteeism numbers from the kinders and first and second grade. And so Gina and her team are an exemplar that we've been spotlighting across the country and not just in Virginia of how do you get our kids back to school and learning, and really great data, especially for those early learners that are transitioning from the early learning spaces.
We're gonna see some good data for this year too. And because some community schools people, we work with EO and community in schools, and I think that grant, community schools grant, and being able to work with those organizations has been tremendous. So I hope to see it.
Well, congratulations and thank you.
I'm Clark Anders. I own 2 child care centers in Chesterfield County. And so I represent for-profit subsidy participating child care centers.
I'm Holly McCartney, originally early childhood faculty JMU, retired, but now I represent Virginia out of school partnership out of school 10.
Great.
Yep, we host together.
Mariam Shahian, I'm a professor of early childhood education representing higher education.
Hi, I'm Susan Patrick, and I'm the EO out of Abingdon, Virginia. I'm also here representing the resource and referral agencies, and I serve as the Ready Region lead for the Southwest region.
Hi, everybody. I'm Boykia Steen. I go by Kia. I'm a professor of early childhood education at George Mason University, as well as the program coordinator at George Mason, as well as the internship coordinator as well.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daryl Turner. I am a pre-K teacher at MLK Preschool, so right down the street from here. I've been teaching in preschool inclusion now. This is coming up on my 9th year, and I represent public school systems.
I'm with the agency, but did also used to teach in middle school.
Yes, good. We'll go to our folks joining virtually. Melinda, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Melinda Langford. I work with Northern Virginia Family Service. We have Head Start and Early Head Start programming, and I'm here representing my agency.
I'm just going to go around in the order that I see folks. Commissioner Williams.
James Williams, Commissioner of Social Services. My primary qualification for being here is that I have two young kids, so that's pretty much all I have. Everyone here is more qualified to be here than I
am. Jen.
Hi, everyone. Jen McDonald. I am ex officio for the Virginia Department of Health, and my division is located under the Office of Family Health Services, and a lot of our work is under the Title V maternal child health auspices. So nice to be here.
Cheryl.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Cheryl Mormon. I represent for-profit family child care providers in Virginia.
Erin.
Hi, my name is Erin Edmondson. I am a preschool director for Thrasher Preschool in Benton. I represent religious exempt childcare facilities.
Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie Buckner, Assistant Secretary of Education. and I think that's all of our members. Allison is a member of OCCHS.
So thank you very much. All right, as a reminder, I'm going to turn it over to our acting chair, Clark Sanders. Shaki, March was her last meeting. She was unable to make it today. So Clark will be our acting until we do the shift over the summer, and then we will vote again for our next chair. So with that, we do have quorum in person. Thank you, everyone. And which means we've got quite a bit of work to get through. So I'll turn it over to Clark for our first action item, which will be to convene and do roll call. We need to formally do roll call. I never introduce myself in roll call. All right.
Welcome everyone to our ECAC meeting for April 17th. Thank you so much for being here. Let's start with roll call.
Absolutely. All right, Ms. Suarez? Here. Oh, and just as a reminder, if you are joining us virtually, if you'll please share where you are joining us from in the state and the reason for your employment. Ms. Parrish? Here. Mr. Anders?
Here.
Ms. Mormon?
Here, from Chesterfield, but had a previous appointment.
Ms. Edmondson?
Benton, Virginia, more than 60 miles away.
Dr. Johnson?
Here, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Ms. Langford?
Here from Alexandria, Virginia.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Dr. Wolford? Here. McMahon? Here. Ms. Howard? Dr. Sharifian? Here. Dr. Steed? Here. Dr. Nelson? Here. Wilberger?
Here.
Ms. Ginvez, I believe, could not make it. Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Ms. Irizarry also could not make it. Or Ms. Lipscomb, and so Ms. McCartney. Here. And Ms. Patrick.
I'm here. It's Dr. Yeah, I'm here.
That gives us a quorum.
Okay, so noted. We have a quorum. Very good. Thank you everyone for being here today. First on the agenda is we have 3 sets of minutes that we need to approve. We have minutes from September 12th, November 21st, and March 19th. These were all sent to you. Has everyone had an opportunity to review? Any questions? May we call for a motion to adopt 3 sets of minutes, September 12th, November 21st, March 19th.
Melinda Langford, I so move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Voted. Rebecca, do we have any public comment?
Not ready today.
Okay, so noted. We have no public comment. With that, I will turn it over to Lieutenant Conway. We'll start our presentation of BQB5.
Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you all so much for being here. I know many of you are, there's a lot that happens in April and May. And so deep appreciation for being here this afternoon. We're gonna have 2 presentations this afternoon that are gonna need endorsements from this body prior to going to the Board of Education. The first is going to be on updates to our guidelines for BQB5. And then the second is going to be on the general procedures for licensure and background checks. So both of these are going to need motions for endorsement and votes at some point. I am going to do joint presentations. So as much fun as it is to hear from me for hours, we are really wanting to be thoughtful about having folks who are closer to and leading the work join me in the presentations. And so our director of VQB5, Chris Myers, will be supporting me in the presentation on the proposed VQB5 2025-26 guidelines. And then our assistant superintendent for the Office of Child Care, Health and Safety will be joining me for the general procedures conversation. So a little bit of a shift there, but let's go ahead and move forward here. Slides. to this. What we want to cover, if we go to slide 6, back up, I think for Chelsea. So, for the guidelines and one more, perfect, thank you. So as a reminder, for the last few years, each spring, we have brought to this body a presentation on the VQB5 guidelines from the original guidelines prior to, as part of the practice year process, and then shifts, evolutions, changes in each subsequent year. Because we haven't had the opportunity to walk through with you all the data from last year, we will incorporate that into this afternoon's presentation. So sharing the results that came out last fall and the platform that we released them on, walking through the successes, the insights, as well as feedback on what we could do better, and then taking you through the shifts for the upcoming guidelines. So again, you're going to start to notice a pattern to this process. We share the data, we share the feedback, the insights, we say, here are the shifts going forward, and then we seek your endorsement. At a very high level, before we kind of get into the weeds here, I should note that we're in the evolution stage rather than maybe the revolution stage in terms of like how much change is occurring. I think that's an important and good thing. And we'll sort of, as we walk through some of the data, and you'll see why, but if I'm going to give away the punchline at the top, it is that this is really a set of shifts or kind of a gradual data-driven evolution rather than a dramatic change. And we think that that's important when you think about systematically, how do we shape improvement across 12,000 classrooms and 3,000 sites. Dramatically changing everything every 3 years is not the way to do that. So that's kind of where we'll go this afternoon. I'll take us through very quickly the kind of the big picture vision and guiding principles, and then turn it over to Chris, who will get us into the details. So just as a reminder, if you've ever seen a presentation from us, you've seen this. I think Commissioner Williams saw this yesterday at the Board of Social Services meeting. But our true north is making sure that all of our kids in the Commonwealth, birth to 5, have opportunities and access to experiences that put them on track for school readiness. And as Dr. Wolford knows, that if we can get kids to kindergarten more prepared academically and social emotionally, we know that our K-12 system can, provide and open many more doors for them so they can fulfill their potential. We know that our system, and I was so touched again as everybody was describing your various roles and responsibilities. It truly is a village, a public-private village of all different types of providers, and making sure that families have a variety of options to choose from, that all of our public and private programs are measured and supported to improve, rewarded for improvement, and that ultimately we're supporting our working families, including many of the folks around this table and on the screen, so they can choose the best option for their children while also being able to pursue greater self-sufficiency for themselves. Our guiding principles, if we'll move to the next slide, have really framed our work for the last few years. We want to be outcomes driven and really thinking kind of kids at the center of our work. We want to make sure that we're measuring quality in a thoughtful way and that we can demonstrate growth over time. We've always agreed we would never do standardized testing for little kids. That wouldn't be appropriate and wouldn't be the right thing to do, but thinking about how do we across 12,000 diverse classrooms measure and support improvement over time. We knew it had to be doable and affordable at scale, and all the different type of programs in the room, 3,200 sites and over 11,000 classrooms. And we wanted to make sure that we would see the results. And we'll talk about how we're starting to see this, that the things that we would measuring, if we could improve them, that we'd start to see that in terms of kids learning more, kids growing more, kids thriving more, and really starting to kind of see that, across all of our classrooms. And last, but certainly not least, making sure that we continue to serve as a resource for families as our children's first and most important educators. After much work, starting with our very early community networks, there's 2 core things we remain focused on. And again, these will remain the same as we go forward next year. But looking at teacher-child interactions as the secret sauce of early childhood, can't be mechanized, can't be on a device, but truly getting into our 12,000 classrooms and looking at the relationships between adults and the children, whether that's infants, toddlers, mixed age, preschoolers, inclusion, as Daryl described, using our nationally regarded classroom assessment scoring system. We're doing that in a big way and in a way that we're leading the nation on. And then also supporting intentionality. And we do that by encouraging programs to choose, and curriculum is always a choice, to choose curriculum that align with our standards. Our reason for this is that we have a lot of research and evidence that shows if you can improve those interactions, you can be intentional about supporting kids' learning and development, that supports their holistic learning and development across that age span, ultimately resulting in more kids coming to school ready and being prepared to thrive. So with that lofty vision, guiding principles, and the core components in place, I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, who's going to get into some data. So as always, as a reminder, even with our new acting chair, there's a lot of information here. Do pause and sort of give us a flag if there's a question about the data as we go through this. But we are really wanting to make sure, whether it's in our early childhood advisory committee, if it's with our deep dives in the field, whether it's when we're engaging with stakeholders, that we're using Virginia data coming from Virginia educators impacting Virginia kids to shape our policy and practice work as we move forward. And the only way to enable best body to do that is to make sure that you have that data before we go into some of those policy shifts. So Ms. Myers, turning it over to you.
Thanks, Jenna. Good afternoon, everybody. So there's also a handout with this first section that's in your packet, the quality rating summary. So we'll walk through a few slides, but this summary is also something that we have publicly available on our early childhood profile website, and we'll update annually as well. So what we're seeing on the screen are the results of our first official year. As you heard Jenna allude to, we had some practice years. That was truly for practice results. And so these were our first public ratings. So we were very pleased that 98% of sites met or exceeded the state's quality expectations. You can see the vast majority there in that meets expectations category, which is the 400 to 699 points. 79 sites exceeded expectations, which truly are those exemplar programs who have very high degree of interactions and use of curriculum. And then 51 sites were in that needs support category. Those sites very quickly in the year, we got them very intensive one-on-one supports through quality consultants and intensive coaching, and we're really pleased with the progress that they're making. We'll have those end of year results excited to share as well. The average as well was 588 points. So for perspective, that kind of gives you a sense of where things fell. On the next slide, we broke it down by site type. Again, one of the things we're looking for are our expectations achievable across our whole unified system. And so you can see that we had exceed expectations in all three of our site types there as well. Need support sites were primarily family day homes and centers. I don't think there was a public school that was in that need support category. And then overall, though, you can see that most sites, whether they were public school, family day home, or center, were in that meets expectations range. And then this is a slide that we've shared also with our ready regions. So although we have that big middle that you saw in that first table, our points that we use to measure, which again are primarily come from the scores on those class observations, we can use those points to kind of break it down and kind of look at, we know those 51 sites in need support are getting those intensive services, but we can also look at meets expectations and see that we have some sites that were kind of just over that cutoff, the 400 to 499. Those sites aren't required to go through coaching, but we can still prioritize them for some additional supports. And then we have a lot of sites, as you see, in that 600 to 699 category, which is also a really strong performance, strong interactions as well. So although we have just those three rating levels, and spoiler alert, we're not changing the three levels next year either. The points will allow us to kind of take a deeper look at the sites and really target our improvement support in more individualized ways. All this work happens primarily through our class observations that really do feed the majority of those points that you were just seeing. Again, the use of curriculum is optional and is some additional points. But this gives you a sense of how many class observations occurred last year, primarily the local class observations. When you look at over 11,000 pre-K observations alone, 6,000 toddler, and almost 3,000 infant observations. Those are the ones conducted and coordinated by our Ready Regions that Susan mentioned that she represents. So a lot of work happening to make sure that those happen twice a year in every classroom. And then our external observations happen in 75% of all classrooms, get at least one external observation. Every site gets at least one external at each age level. So not every classroom ends up getting external, but most end up getting that external as our kind of additional check. So what you see here for the averages is the local observations, like in our practice years, they do tend to trend a little bit higher than the external observation scores. However, when you look at the trends by age level, it's similar. So the highest average is infant in both our local and our external, followed by pre-K, and then followed by toddler. The ranges as well have actually a very similar trend. We see some very, very low local scores, very, very low external scores, and also some very high local and high external ranges as well. Partly of what we do is if we see any really unusual local scores, like extremely low or extremely high, that is something that we would flag as a scoring pattern that I know you have more information about in the guidelines, and that's a way we can use those external observations as a check. Curriculum, again, is also part of our system. That's the additional 100 points if programs choose to use an early childhood curriculum in at least one classroom. So what you're seeing here is our classroom use, because we do ask all classrooms to report their use of approved curriculum. That's the circle there on the left. That has increased from the practice years. So it has gone up from 82% the previous year to now 85% of our classrooms reported using an early childhood curriculum, an approved early childhood curriculum. And then the site one, remember, is just sites who reported using an approved curriculum in at least one classroom. So that is also going up. So now 84% of sites reported they were using an approved curriculum in at least one classroom. We are proposing some changes here, some slight changes. So we'll talk about that more when we get to the proposed updates. And so this, I think, Susan, your Ready Region snapshot is in pictures. Yes.
The corner.
The corner. So one of the best parts of my job actually was last fall, traveling around in person to all 9 of the Ready Regions, along with several of my colleagues who joined us. Jenna made it to quite a few of these, and each of our Ready Regions hosted what we called a data deep dive, where we shared the slides you saw and about 50, 60 more data slides where we really walked through both the state and the regional results with kind of a variety of stakeholders. And there was opportunity for questions and feedback as well. It was really exciting because some of these happened right before the profile website launched. And so we were talking about what it was going to look like. And then we had one literally the day after it launched. But it gave us a good opportunity to talk about the exciting place that we were at with the launch of the public profile website. That was a highlight. Another highlight from the fall was the release of our public rating. I know we shared with you some of that information last fall. There was a press release and lots of other communications. What's been exciting to see since is the usage of this website. And we got an update recently. It's now over 72,000 views of the public quality profile website. So we know it is being well looked at and well used. And then we have encouraged sites to promote their quality ratings. And so this is just a couple examples. One of our own staff members, children attend a site where they posted their certificate there on their family bulletin board. A Ready Region that's celebrating a family childcare provider with her certificate, and a school system that posted something on their social media page about all their programs meeting or exceeding expectations. And there's many, many more. We just didn't have room to put all of them up here, but that's been exciting to see as well. So let me just pause. Jenna, anything else to add on the first section or any quick questions?
No, I think that the one piece I would add is it was so much excitement coming off the release of the profiles in early October. You know, I have framed in my office the top of the fold Richmond Times Dispatch article headline that indicated that 98% of sites are meeting expectations that happened to be published on the day that legislators came to town. So was a very powerful message about the system. And I can't say enough, from the deep dives to the conversations that we had with stakeholders and elected officials throughout the course of the General Assembly, just how word is getting out there about seeing these programs as valuable, recognizing that quality can be found in different types of settings, and having that information that 70,000 plus folks have viewed is just really building so much credibility in the broader system, sort of beyond the sum of its parts. So I just wanted to share that.
So let's shift from the release of the first full year's information to where we were and where we were going to be in March. We wanted to summarize our fall 2024 successes because as successful as our first year was, I think we're seeing even more success this second year as well. So just a snapshot here on the screen. I won't read all of these to you, but we continue to have strong participation. Again, thanks to the work on the ground with our Ready Regions. Almost 16,000 teachers benefiting from Recognizing 5 this year. And one thing that we'll highlight a little bit more on the next slide is the completion of those classroom lists, which, if you recall, this was the first year that was actually a requirement. So 85% of classrooms, and I think now it's actually up to 90% because they can continue to add those as well. Measurement, just under 100%, 99.8% of classrooms completed their fall local observation, which is just a lot of work and a lot of feedback for teachers as well. And then 81% of sites are reporting that approved curriculum. Mostly, though, that really means that we have lots of data to use for individualized support. So you can see we're giving feedback, we're helping people use their curriculum to improve their interactions. Our regions, our sites are really delving into that data. They get additional data files every other week. And our needs support sites are getting that intensive support, which has been going really well. Next slide. So I think we highlight just a couple of things here. One, this is a map that we love to see with our participation growing. So in our second year, we had almost 300 more sites register and complete that registration process. So our participation has increased. We had at least one VQB5 site in every single city and county. And so now we continue that trend. You can see kind of where the populated areas are as well, but we reach all corners of the state, and that's including our centers, our family day hubs, and our public schools. And then the classroom list, probably shortly after all our ECAC and board presentations last year, we had a lot of great conversations, I think, with Clark and some childcare leaders who had different questions and concerns about the classroom list process. And so we spent a lot of time kind of taking their questions and concerns and developing what we called a classroom list toolkit, which we released in September, that really walked people through the purpose of classroom lists, the steps to complete, including informing families, information about data security. There were a lot of questions about that. And it was very well received and is being very well used. So we will make little updates to that for the year ahead. But overall, that's been a tremendously supportive and well-used resource. And then this just kind of shows, again, in the practice years, we had classroom lists, but it was optional. And so you can see that it was very little, just about 900 classrooms that completed classroom list in the practice years with that requirement, with the additional information in the toolkit and the one-on-one support from Ready Regions. Again, we got to 85% completion of, and this is classroom level, right? Not just sites, completed those classroom lists. So this grew a lot, and we're continuing to see a few continue to get submitted as well. So the Ready Region deep dives were one of the highlights of our engagement, but certainly not the only way that we try to engage with the field. So lots of webinars that folks around the room help us with, our VQB5 webinars, lots of meetings with our Ready Regions, resources that are online, and surveys every time we do webinars and put out to the field. So this is just a snapshot again of kind of everything that we've been doing, and every time we do some event, we really take the time to review all the feedback. Jenna literally reads the survey results, and kind of pay attention to what are the trends, what are people saying that's working well for them, and where are their areas for refinement. So on the next slide, that's what we tried to do here, is to summarize the key feedback themes. So our strengths that we're seeing as a statewide system that are again coming from our data and the feedback from the field. We are continually hearing from sites, leaders, and teachers who are seeing the impact of those class observations and the frequent feedback that they're getting. That was the #1 positive piece of feedback when we did our mid-year survey that people wrote about their best experience was getting that individualized feedback on class observations. We're hearing a lot of positivity about having curriculum to implement and having how it's helping teachers plan and lead their classrooms. Lots of kudos for the partners who are helping those sites on the ground, our Ready Regions, our Link V5, our improvement partners. And so sites really appreciate having that individualized and different types of support. And then lots of positive feedback around the quality profile. Sites seem to really appreciate being recognized for their quality, all types of programs, and having that available for the field and for families. Some places where the feedback kind of gives us some areas for continued refinement. We continue to know that although some of our programs have been with us since the practice years, we have new leaders starting all the time, new teachers starting all the time. And so as we have new folks coming into the system, we want to make sure that we're continuing to have, clear guidance about deadlines, different ways to communicate so that all that information is getting to people in the best way possible without overloading them, because sometimes we also hear, Celia's nodding her head, that sometimes they get too many emails. And so we also are trying to think about how do we all, with our regional and state partners, continue to try to communicate in the best ways possible. The second one, as I alluded to as well, we know teacher retention and teacher turnover. There are new teachers and leaders who are just starting with BQB5. And so we're trying to think about how do we have some supports in place to better support those brand new folks as they come into BQB5. Technology is always an ongoing issue. So our Link B5 and our Ready Regions do a great job trying to support folks with that, but we are also trying to think about how our technology systems, how we can support those needs. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about some of that transition in a couple slides. And then the last one will definitely be a focus. We have a lot of data now in Virginia. And so we really want to support not just us using it at the state or even at the regional level, but how do we really strengthen our site leaders and our teachers to be able to use their own data to identify where they're doing well and where they're getting. Pause. Any additional comments, Jenna, or you want to jump right into our proposed updates? Let's jump right in. So you have the giant guidelines document with you. When I first grabbed the packet, I was like, why is this so big? And then I remembered, oh, it's because of the guidelines document that I wrote. So the guidelines are following the same pattern as other years, and really probably 90% of this document is the same. We really tried not to change things unless we felt like we were either clarifying something that needed clarification or enhancing parts of the system so that we can make an even bigger impact. Next slide. So there are 4 kind of key proposed updates that we want to spend some time on today. So I'm just going to read them real quick here, but then each of these we will take some time. We'll go into a little more depth in the next couple slides. So the first key proposed update is that we're going to migrate the Link V5 system into a system called VA Connects with other key systems. So that will integrate the Link V5, the VCareP, and the VALS data systems. That's part of us getting to improving child outcomes, part of the state law. So we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Our second key change is actually a change that won't occur in another year, but we want to start preparing the field for a curriculum change. We want to strengthen the use of curriculum materials across all classrooms. So starting actually in the 2026-27 year, we will only award those 100 additional points if they're using an approved early childhood curriculum in every classroom. So not actually a change for next year, but as we'll talk about in a few slides, we are going to start preparing the field for that change. The third is enhancements to the quality profiles. So as excited as we are about the rollout of the quality profiles, we have some enhancements to make them even more impactful. So one of the things that we'll talk about is launching a statewide honor roll. And this honor rolls will recognize top performing sites and also sites who show significant annual improvement. We'll also be adding historical ratings information so that folks can track performance over time. And we'll talk about a few other enhancements based on some feedback from the field on how to increase the usability of the website. The fourth key update, is a change that we have started sharing since last summer, but again, is a big change to the field. But there, as you're aware, there are no funds for Recognize B5 in the 2025-2026 state budget. So that does mean there would not be an incentive for educators next year. Again, this is something we've been communicating for a while, but are continuing to make sure that that information is out to the field. So let's talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So migrating Link B5 into VA Connects, and my hats off to my colleague here, Tiara West, who really is leading a lot of this work. And you'll be hearing a lot more about this over the next couple of months. But starting in August 2025, so when our programs log in to register in August, Link B5 will be migrated into what's called Virginia Connects for Kids. We'll call it VA Connects. And this is an integrated data system that's secure, that will link Link B5, the VALS literacy screening, and the VKRP. This will help us related to our work to improve child outcomes by helping us better systematically measure that, including school readiness. It'll help us support educators by increasing their ease of use and reporting information. It will ensure that we have best-in-class operability and security, which we know folks are very interested in as well, and hopefully will improve that technology experience for users. This will also ensure that we're complying with the law. Part of VSQ B5 is to enable outcome-based measurements. And then the thing that we will continually be messaging, although this does have some kind of appearance changes to it, it really doesn't change the actual functions of what programs will be doing in Link B5. So the same types of information, entering class scores, entering their use of approved curriculum, doing site profiles, that will not change. So they will still be using it in a very similar way. It will just have some different appearances and ways to log into the system. So on the next slide, there's a great visual that just shows kind of the three systems that will be under VA Connects. And the three goals that we touched on as well, having a secure, state-of-the-art system, having a way to better integrate data across systems, and that third goal of enhancing a consistent user experience. We have some of our folks who use all three of these systems and some who will only use just Link B5. So it will vary based on users' access, but this is a way that hopefully we can enhance that user, especially for those who are using all three parts. So our Link B5 users, which are our sites who are participating in VQB5, they can expect a better interface, a streamlined process. Some examples, educators will complete one profile and that will be shared across Link B5, VKRP, and VALS if they are part of all three of those systems. One of the big key updates was to make this more mobile friendly. We know from the field that especially our family childcare providers, but a lot of our educators as well are wanting a mobile way to access and use the system. So this will be a much more efficient experience on a mobile platform. And then school divisions, site administrators, educators will have a single platform, a single login. So again, somebody who is using all three of those systems used to have 3 different logins, and now they can log in with that one account. Let me just pause there. Tiara, anything else you want to add about VA Connects or Jenna?
Questions about that? So will they talk to each other in that you could compare teachers' class scores of how her children did on the VKRP, that type of stuff? Great.
Yeah, that's the.
Thank you.
It'll be connected on the back end and our site will be shared across all three of these platforms. If that site is participating in all three, and so we'll be able to.
I just want to thank you all because it's been great. data.
You may remember the visual from a few years ago, but the goal here is to understand how the early childhood experiences shape growth and outcomes, right? And so again, you'll think about there's a discrete set of points. Thanks to, if you combine two different things that Chris has shared, much more information on classroom lists, right, with parent permission, means that we understand, we have much more detail about which kids are in which classrooms, and then connecting the dots on the back end here will also help us understand, okay, experiences that kids are having, how much are they growing over time, and ultimately, what do they look like when they come to kindergarten? How does that kindergarten year look, and even all the way, into third grade, and thanks to the longitudinal data system through high school graduation and post-secondary. Patience is required, right? We only move at the pace of the children. And, last year's our first group. We're really this year with the classroom list this fall. So this is really the group that we have the most information about across the system. But we don't think anybody else in the country has this type of safe, secure data at scale that can really connect kids' experiences to kids' outcomes. And again, with no stakes there, right? We still are focused, as Chris has described, on the teacher-child interaction. That's what's measured, but being able to kind of work then with research partners and others, and again, with lots of precautions around kid data, we think is truly, and at scale and in all of your communities is truly game-changing. So again, it will take step by step. And this will help with usability and security and make it a little easier for folks like Gina and Daryl to use. You have to go to 3 different systems. But ultimately, the big win for Virginia kids is how this will be able to track information and glean insights longitudinally over time.
So is there a way we would be able to access that longitudinal data, or will we have to reach out to our school divisions and have them tell us like how our kids are doing in 3rd grade, 5th grade?
Yeah, so we won't surface any child level data to sites that they are not actively participating in or enrolled in. So your 4-year-olds today, when they go to kindergarten, you wouldn't be able to see their kindergarten result. But we do plan on doing a ton of analyses kind of at the site level and see what early childhood sites are funneling into what public schools and what do their kindergarten ratings look like. And we work really closely with our school divisions and our ready regions to get that information out. And so that you could kind of understand, if most of your children go to this school, what was that school's kindergarten?
And Appendix D was also added to the large guidelines document that has all the data security details because we get questions where people really want that level of detail. So it was in the classroom list toolkit, but we also added it in the guidelines officially as well. Okay, let's shift to our second key change. So this is the one that is actually a preparation for a change to come in the 2026-2027 year. But as you know, we have been awarding 100 points and will continue for this year and next year to sites who are using an approved curriculum in one classroom. But starting in 2026, those 100 points would be awarded if they are using that in all classrooms. And this will help us kind of get to the place where classrooms are hopefully more encouraged to use it across all their age levels so that our infants and toddlers and pre-K can benefit from the use of that high quality curriculum. We don't think this change will be huge. Our guesses, and we'll show you some data here, is that we think it'll impact about 5% of sites. Most sites that are using an approved curriculum are already using it in every classroom, but where there are sites that either have not chosen to use one or who are only using it in one classroom, we'll have some very targeted supports to try to make sure they're aware of this change and to support them if they choose to use it in every classroom. So again, no change in curriculum points for next year, and curriculum will still be optional even when this change goes into effect. But then starting in the fall of 2026, that's where the reported use will start to impact their actual change as well in their points. Ourselves and Ready Regions, and I think on one of the next slides, we'll walk through just some of the ways that we'll support and make sure that this is communicated to the field. This is just kind of a visual to summarize this change. I think this is in the guidelines as well, but just for sites to kind of think about what their status is. again, thinking ahead 2 years really from now, the 2026-2027 year. If we get to that May 31st date and the site is not using an approved curriculum, for this current year, there's no points awarded and that would remain the same. So if they're not using an approved curriculum, there's really no change in the points. It's this middle category where there would be a change. So right now, a site is using an approved curriculum in at least one, but not every classroom. They get the 100 points currently, but by the fall of 2027 on their profile, they would not get those 100 points. And then no change really for the sites who are using it in every classroom. They would get the 100 points now. They would get the 100 points on their fall 2027 profile. The one slight change is in the fall of 2026, we will on the profile acknowledge sites that are already using approved curriculum in every classroom, just so they have that public acknowledgement, but the points won't actually shift till the following year. And then on the, oh yeah, we have 2 more slides. On this slide, again, we were really trying to predict the potential impact of this. So wanted to break it down just a little bit more. Again, this is based on last year's results. So we'll do the same analysis once we have our final results from this current year. But you can see about 80% of classrooms are using approved curriculum, so they would not see any change in this in the points. There are about 60 sites, 2% that would see a change, but they would actually, even though their points might change, they would stay within their same quality rating level. 68 sites, another 2% would see a change in their points and their quality rating level. Mostly, as you see, that would change sites that would no longer get that exceeds expectations. So again, we'd want them to know that they would need to use that approved curriculum in every classroom. And then 4 sites would actually no longer meet expectations, again, using last year's data. And then 16% don't use a curriculum. So again, if they continue to choose not to use an approved curriculum, there wouldn't be a change there as well. And then I won't read everything here to you, but we have really been intentional. Thank you to Marie's work as well and her team on how can we step by step communicate this to the field and keep everybody kind of well aware of what this change means and how it might impact their rating. So similar to what we did in the practice years before, like we had score replacement, we actually let people know what score replacement might look like on their rating results. And so we'll do something similar when we let them preview their results during data verification so they can see what this potential might look like if they don't make any type of change. We'll also do lots of communications and targeted supports to those sites who aren't using it yet in every classroom so that they have every opportunity to get supported and increase their if they want to. And just pause there briefly before we shift to quality profiles. I also want to watch time, but anything real quick to add?
Yeah, I just emphasize this is a little bit of an unusual ask in terms of the endorsement here. We just wanted to make sure folks had a very long window of understanding, right? So what this change really would say is that folks, in order to get the full points, would need to make sure that they're using a curriculum in all their classrooms by May of 2027, right? Which is the Yes, May of 2027. So again, that's it feels like, centuries from now, in early childhood speak. But I think a part of it is when, even though it's probably 5% of sites, it's still a shift. We still want folks to bring that intentionality. And so a long window so that all of next year folks can say, okay, this is doable. I've got plenty of time. I can think about how to do it, doing this thoughtfully. Again, when we think about the pace of change here, this group landed on recommending it in one classroom a few years ago, just because the big change was not for Head Start or for state pre-K, but a really significant, like 45% of our family childcare and 55% of our childcare were using curriculum. And we've now made really significant gains. And so we see this as the next step. It's still a self-attestation, right? There's still plenty of flexibility in terms of, and there's 70 options and it's a choice, but we think it's a best practice to be encouraging curriculum across all of our settings. And in order to kind of, give people the opportunity to be successful, we think a 2-year window makes sense here versus the other shifts we're proposing will go into effect next year.
Jenny, in early childhood, like not a school system, how do they go about selecting those? Is the parents get involved in reviewing those like we do? I selected 3 or 4, and then we had parents come in and do a vetting process. Then how's that work for childcare?
I think it runs the gambit. I would turn to the subject matter experts around the table if folks want to chime in on how, whether it's a leadership decision or whether there's.
I wondered if I think there's sort of two ways to think about it. Like from the list building perspective, I think that what's really important about our system is that every curricula that we have vetted came from a Virginia provider. So a provider in Virginia said, hi, I'm using this, or I'm interested in using this. Can you make sure that it aligns with the ELDs and meets baseline quality? And so that's how the list was built itself. So there are some folks that came to their approved curriculum choice because they picked something, they got it vetted, and that's where it is. For folks that have chosen to adopt curriculum over time, we've offered webinars where we connect them directly with vendors, but ultimately the different providers get to make that choice for themselves. And we're very proud that 4 of those options are free or low cost, and 2 of those are available birth to 5, so can be used in infant and toddler classrooms as well as preschool. So some folks do come to us for help or go to their Ready regions for recommendations, but for the most part, we just want to make sure that what we make available is we
Sorry, this is out of my expertise, so I'm curious to hear what providers here think about those 64 sites that are at very high quality, right? They have the highest quality ratings, the expectations, their points and quality rating would change. Just wondering what feedback, if any, you received from any of those places that would be affected and what their sort of reasoning is for not using curriculum.
We've not heard from them since we've rolled out this change, which we had a webinar shortly after our last ECAC meetings, anything specifically from these sites about being concerned. But I think that's also why, as we continue to communicate it and give a big window, that will have lots of opportunities for folks to let us know if they do have concerns about that.
Chris, I have 2 questions. So the 100% curriculum is effective fall of 26, deadline May 27. But you mentioned it will display on the website centers that are using 100% curriculum this fall of 25, or is that
26.
also is fall of 26? Okay.
So basically your use next year would inform
Right.
that change on the public profile.
And then second question, the 511 sites not using curriculum, and I guess the key word is not using approved curriculum.
Correct.
Do you have data? Do you know that? I mean, I'm shocked at that number, but do you know that if they're using curriculum, they're just choosing not, because the approved curriculum list is, for those who don't know, very long. And some are free.
Yeah.
Right.
Marie,
Do you know data? What,
do you want?
what they're doing?
Sure. So I think we don't collect if they are using a curriculum that has not been approved. There is no way for them to enter that in B5 right now. We are in communication with some sites who might have requested a curriculum to be vetted. And then we work with vendors, but we can only move it if the vendor never sends us something to vet, then we can't take it through that process. So we have built lists of providers who might be using a pending curriculum that has been pending for a while, and we keep them updated on our collaboration with the vendor and make sure that they know by February of every year where we are with those pending curriculum, so that they can make an informed choice for that school year if they want to choose to adopt something, are okay with not getting the 100 points, or something, or want to choose something different. And so the short answer is no, but we are in communication if they're seeking approval for something.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we will see there always will be some programs that choose not to use curriculum or choose to use something that may never be approved, right? I mean, again, whether it's, ideological or other reasons, right? I think that's really important, right? That the sort of idea is that mathematically you can meet expectations. Ultimately, as Dr. Nelson was noting, we think for the exceeds expectations, you should be embodying those best practices in addition to the measured interactions. But we also think because it's a choice to take public dollars and we have an incredibly diverse set of publicly funded private providers too, that offering that, that sort of long tail of folks who might just choose something altogether. And some would just say, not there yet, right? And I think we'll sort of take that as a not there yet in terms of continuing to make sure that they're in particular, those free or low cost resources are available to them.
Okay, let's go to the third key change, one of my favorites, enhancing the quality profiles. Again, it's been really successful with our launch of early childhood quality.doe.virginia.gov. One of the changes in the guidelines, this is one of the few sections that we shortened. We usually add text, but our guidelines used to have all this information about the development of the profile website. And now that we actually have it, we could actually shorten that section of the guidelines. So that's the information that's in there, the reminder that we will always on that annual basis update the information, we'll add the historical information, and then we'll work on publishing some statewide honor rolls. We've not completely defined those honor rolls. We're in the process of looking again at some of our current data, running some different scenarios to determine the top performing sites, and especially some different ways that we could look at sites who show significant improvement. So we'll be kind of working with that, working with our ready regions, and we'll have more details on that a little later in the spring, but definitely want to recognize both the top performers and those who show significant improvement.
Question for you. When you look at the data for improvement meets, exceeds, it's definitely not a bell curve. It's a boom, boom. And your meets expectations is really wide. Was there any thought effort to shifting your exceeds to a little bit more, bringing it down a little more, just because you have such a spread in meets expectations?
Yeah, so if you were to go back, and if you go back for a moment, just to go back to slide 13, this gives you, and part of our reason, but 100 points is a rather arbitrary sort of delineation, but I think this gives you a little bit more of a sense of the breakdown here, and you could do the same just for the interaction points. In large part, we're trying to go at the pace of the field here. And I think some of you have heard me talk about this before. In Louisiana, there was a point where we started to hear in surveys, in interactions with stakeholders, that programs who might be in that bucket, the one that's about 1,400 sites right now, the 600 to 699, started to say, hey, we see ourselves as different from programs that are in that 400 to 499 bucket, right? And really sort of said, we think we should split this middle. And I think we created something called approaching proficient and proficient in that case. And if we started to hear that from you all from the field, I think we would then bring a bunch of data to you on doing that. And again, this is, I think, part of what makes this measurement and improvement system so strong, is that we're trying to kind of go the pace. So at this same point, in our trajectory in Louisiana, we were splitting the difference. We didn't hear that last year, right, from you all. And so, as Chris, brought back the data and feedback to the field, we said, okay, that's not usually what the field is asking for now. But it's certainly something as we roll out next year and the sort of subsequent year, if we start to hear from you that we see these programs as different, the differentiation truly feels real and credible, then that's the moment where we would potentially look at how you might divide this up further and do that. Mathematically, what's really unique, and I would say pretty awesome about the system, even though it's a big middle, each of you have a 3-digit score. That's your own unique score, right? And I just think it's like very rare where you can kind of thread the needle like that, where we're able to say, if you were worried about meeting expectations, which is also what we heard from private programs in the beginning. Like, what if you run it, roll out the system and I don't meet expectations? So we've reassured people there, you still have your unique score. I think we'll sort of see, Jennifer, over the next few years, if folks start to say, these really feel different in terms of what kids are experiencing, and we're ready as a field to do that. I think we remain open, but I didn't feel any urge to push that, even though we had in Louisiana, simply because the field in Virginia is not ready yet.
But it's something we could have some conversation
Absolutely,
about.
we can have a conversation about, yeah.
Great, yeah, good question.
Thank you.
I'll keep that.
No.
All right. Okay. Let's go back to I think we're on our last key update. Just a few other smaller additional updates. Next one, Chris, keep going. Number 4, it should be the, there we go. So again, this is not something that's new. Hoping with our communications, we've done communications directly to eligible educators, to site leaders through our Ready Regions. But again, as everybody's aware here, there currently are no funds for Recognize B5 in the state 2025 budget. So there will not be educator incentive next year. This year, we have reduced it because without those COVID funds, we weren't able to maintain it at that same level. And the state had made an investment for this year of $20 million, which allowed us to continue Recognize B5 at that lower rate. But there is not that investment for next year as well. So again, we will continue to try to communicate this. We're just wrapping up, I think, the first payment to educators. And so as we get to the end of the year, we'll make sure, again, we don't want any surprises of people expecting that this would be coming next year. So we'll continue to communicate that. We have a lot of the information from what we learned through Recognize B5 that our eval team has helped us with. And so we will continue to kind of use the lessons learned from that to advocate for the field, the work of the commission and things as well. About the importance just of access compensation for teachers as well. That's all with this one. This one doesn't have an extra slide of details. So. Additional updates. So these are just a couple things that were updated in the guidelines, but are basically just really updating things to make sure it aligns with current guidance that's already out to the field. So we just needed to make the changes officially in the guidelines. The first one is related to classroom lists. We're actually going to start calling those student child lists. We heard from the field that some people were confused when we said they had to add a classroom list. They thought we meant add a classroom profile. And so there was some confusion there. And since these are lists of students who are enrolled or list of children who are enrolled, I feel like student child lists will more accurately capture that and help the field better understand what this is. Really, the information in the guidelines follows the same steps from that classroom list toolkit, which again, we just hadn't had developed until last September. The second update is related to the second edition version of the pre-K class. That has been out in the field since 2022, and we have had an FAQ in our local observation guidebook that talks about that if anybody gets certified on second edition, they're actually certified on both tools reliable. So that hasn't changed. We just made it a little clearer in our guidelines that it is an allowable use for flexibility and that we will encourage some use related to professional development, but we're not changing the actual tool that will be used for the observation. We're working with Ready Regions to make sure there's more awareness and information to the field, but no actual changes in the tool being used. And then the third is related to the required improvement planning for needs support in section 7.3. Again, this was our first year of requiring improvement support. And so within our office and our DECC partners who do the coaching, we developed very clear protocols and procedures. And so we have just put those formally into the guidelines to more clarify what those expectations are. And then on the next slide, in section 7, one of the things that we wanted to make more explicit and make sure that we're promoting in the field is the amount of the publicly available data that we have now. And so we've had this data, we've been talking about it with folks, but we now have it linked and explained in section 7 related to improvement. These are all pieces that we will work to keep updated as best as we can. The first 3 are specific to our BQB5 work. And then using some of our educator profile information from Link B5 and our eval partners, there's a lot of great workforce data that is also publicly available. So we have not only included these links now in section 7, but throughout section 7, we've tried to reference how some of this data is being used by the state to inform our improvement efforts. We'll be working more closely with our Ready Regions as well to use that additional site and classroom data that sites have and regions have to guide that improvement work as well. Our inclusive classroom profile work has also been updated. I know Sandy's been working really closely with Dawn Hendricks in our office as well. And so the main update here is that there is more of a formal process now for helping get more reliable users of the ICP that aligns with our work related to class. And so they have a process in place for continuing to support those who want to become reliable in ICP as well. So I think that's it. Let me just do the 2 next step slides and then we'll open it up. So we're actually out of March now, so we'll shift this slightly. But you will be completing your first review of the guidelines today. We had our statewide webinar on March 21st. That recording has been viewed many hundreds of times and continues to be available for the field. We're in the process of hosting lots of different stakeholder presentations. The main topic of interest seems to be VA Connects. So Tamira is very busy scheduling lots of presentations to the field throughout April and May. And then at the end of May, the board will complete their first review of the proposed guidelines. As a reminder, our spring observation window closes May 31st and sites can continue to update the curriculum information through May 31st. Then we move into summer. The board will complete their second review of the proposed guidelines. And then we literally June 1st start taking those results as of May 31st and calculating the results from the 2024-2025 measurement data. In July, is that opportunity to review and confirm their quality profile information during data verification. That will be the last full 2 weeks in July. And if there are any changes that need to be made, that's where we can make those changes and finalize the results. Registration for the next year opens August 15th. Again, these are the same annual dates. We're keeping these dates consistent to help people remember them and not have changes. And then we'll be excited before you know it in the fall to release our next quality profiles and honor rolls in the fall of 2025. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jenna to wrap this up here.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Chris. This is just so exciting. Again, I just got goosebumps thinking about October of last year and just the rollout. But as you see, you know, a couple of important shifts based on feedback driven by data, you know, much of the same, but really trying to put the pieces in place to support system-wide improvement with the goal of improving outcomes for all of our little learners. Let's see if there's any outstanding questions, and then Clark, I'll turn it to you to seek a motion for endorsement.
I just have a weird question.
Yeah.
About families. So how do families gain access about this, like their knowledge? Like how do we get the word out to all of the families? Because this would be it's useful information for families when they're making decisions about, you know, where to place their children, that sort of thing. But
Absolutely. And so, and I think that that's still an open question on how we're doing it. We had a plan around the launch. I think a lot of that hinges on our work with our Ready regions. And I don't know, Susan, if you want to chime in here, and they have family. So remember now all of the Ready regions are required to have a family impact council. And so that helps us sort of think about both how we produce resources that are understandable and available to families, and then how do you do that kind of equally important work of disseminating them to families. We did a press release. We've got it. If you go to the VDOE website, it's one of the first things that scrolls across, but I would say it's probably through our work with the Ready regions that they're closer to families than say we are. What would you add?
Yeah, I would just add that we are driving it from the Ready region and through our family councils, but we're also depending on sites to share this information with families because they're the ones that see them every day. And so making sure that things like they're posting their quality profile, then that makes families wonder, like, well, what does that quality profile mean? And if it's on their Facebook page, like we saw in the one example, it links the family to information about that. So really just trying to get sites to buy into, hey, I need to share this with my families. And that gets families that are already in this system more familiar with it. We're using our family councils right now to try to determine how do we get to families that aren't already in the system. So we're working through that right now in Southwest, at least with our family council, to say, okay, families, how do you receive information? Where are you getting this information from? And how do you use it when you have it?
Thank you.
Not a question, but just a comment that I think the group needs to be aware of. That when Chris mentioned early in her presentation about classroom lists and engagement and so forth, through my work with the Virginia Child Care Association, I can tell you that there was quite a bit of uneasiness in the field from centers when they were being told submit classroom lists in this portal. A lot of uneasiness. And Chris and Jenna immediately engaged with the Child Care Association. And it was never, this is how it's going to be, get used to it. It was like, hey, let's sit down and talk about it, which is exactly what they did. And it may not have won everybody over, but it won a large portion. It really settled the masses, just for them to come and to actually attend one of our board meetings. And that was outstanding. So thank you all for that.
And vice versa. That's how we came up with the steps that actually the first step is inform your families that you're in VQB5 to begin with. And what does that mean to do get parent permission when needed? So that was, equally as helpful for us.
We now include it in our tour packet. We can jump in.
It's an exciting Saturday night read.
That in the guidelines, I know last Saturday you all were reading.
No, I think, and I, with the, huge thanks to the association, Shakira here, the Head Start Association, I know Conda works very closely with Dawn all, and then and Cheryl as well. I mean, I think we really are trying every step of the process, with the goal being by the time it comes to this body that we have had and really been intentional about making sure that all of our various providers impacted have had the opportunity to weigh in. And cases where we still think it's a big change, like curriculum, giving 2 years rather than 1 year, so that we can just be so careful about not surprising anyone, and where there is unease, addressing it rather than mandating something.
Is there a motion to endorse the 25-26 VQB5 proposed guidelines?
I would love to make a motion to.
So
With
moved.
minimal changes. The regular, yay.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Aye.
Excellent. All right, so our next item, which we will also need an endorsement for, is our general procedures for licensure and background checks. One of the favorite games that I play with Jeff, we meet weekly, is where are we on our regulations? And at what stage in the process? And so you might feel like you've heard this before. But it is an iterative process subject to the Administrative Procedures Act.
Talk about general procedures and half the
Yes,
room leaves.
I know.
Don't blame you.
On brand, it's got on brand. But we are gonna start with orient you first on the status. So because you think I'm joking here, but you gotta really wait. I swear I've heard this before. You have a walkthrough, public comment we've received, some of the changes, and where we go from here. This is separate from the broader set of regulations for the child day sector, which are still in progress. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but I'm going to turn it over to our incredible Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Child Care, Health and Safety to kind of first orient you on status, what we've heard from the field and what has been changed, and then we'll walk you through that. All right, Jenny.
Great. Yes, that was the fun part of the afternoon. So now we're going to get down to some of the nitty gritty. You gotta forgive me for being a little bit giddy, but this is really close to being done. Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we will be able to get there. But do want to do a quick shout out to my two associate directors, Jessica Silva and Victoria Dawson. Victoria for a lot of the big lift and getting these going, Jessica for keeping them going, and two legislative consultants, Todd Tanisha Armstrong and Allison Williams. They have put in so much time and effort, and they probably don't share my giddiness. They are probably like, oh my gosh, it'll finally be done and Jeff will stop pestering us. But they have just done a fantastic job. So quick question, who was not in this room or a part of this group in 2022? Raise your hand, please. Got a few folks, okay. So just a quick reminder, in this time in 2022, March of 2022 is when we put out the NORA to repeal the background check regulations, the general procedures and the fee regs and combine them into one. So that was March of 2022. So here we are, April of 2025, and we're getting really, really close. So next slide, please. So we've gotten to the point where we've done a revision. It's gone out to public comment. We've gotten public comment back. So basically what our job to do is when we get public comment back is see, okay, what might we need to tweak or change to the general procedures, background checks, because they're now combined, to make them more clear. What kind of feedback do we get? So next slide, please. Actually, 2 slides. Oh, I'm sorry, you were, yep, back to, yep. So what I'm going to do here is the next 3 slides list the section and topic area, the areas of concern, and what we did or did not do. So one kind of quick disclaimer is, even if we cannot modify the regulation, if there's something that we can do operationally, we want to try and do that. So some more clarification needs to be done, but it can't be done via a regulation or code. Then we'll kind of maybe put out some guidance or something along those lines. So over on the right, you'll notice the first one, it says no change. Some of the things that are asked for are outside of our authority to do, because it's like, oh, this is code mandated, or this is something that's defined in code. Other things that we can do is add a little bit of clarification to certain things. One of the things that we also might choose to do is just better educate the public in terms of what we can or can't do. So the goal is, if possible, to do as little tweaking to the proposed as possible, because if you do a substantive change, it has to go back through some approvals. It has to go back to the Attorney General for review. It's got to go back to the Secretary and Governor. Then it's got to go out for public comment. Then public comment has to be done, has to come back. And since we've already talked about a 3-year process, we want to be slow to do something that's going to generate an even drawn out, because we are very comfortable that these are good regulations. So just really quickly, a reminder that the background checks were being repealed because the majority of it had been put in code over the past 4 or 5 years. So it was replicating code, and it sometimes contradicted code. The general procedures is that those things that we use as the department to regulate providers, appeals, adverse enforcement, allowable variances. So it's a lot about administration, which also is guided by code. And so if the code addressed it, then we removed it from general procedures unless we need to add in a little bit of clarification. And then the fees, we just roll them into one regulation, trying to meet Governor Youngkin's desire to reduce regulations, make the process easier. So those are kind of our guiding principles. So I'm not going to read verbatim what's on the screen, but I'm going to just talk about the areas of concern. And then if you want to go into more detail, we can. I'll kind of take your cue as to whether we do that. All right. So the first one that was up there was the definition of good moral character and reputation is too vague and open to broad interpretation. Part of the struggle with that, it is a code mandated term. And the code also talks about what we need to look at in order to determine good moral character. And so part of that is also determined by laws and court cases. Court cases will be like, yes, you need to look at that. No, you don't need to look at that. So we didn't do any change there. Second one, posting requirements and transfer of license upon sale or purchase. No change related to that. Public consumer information must be made available. There was something that we were hoping to submit in the general procedures regarding information about when a provider sells their location. And this was mostly to help subsidy families know about what was upcoming. But that is a substantive change outside of our preview. So we did not go ahead and make that change, even though that's something that we were talking about doing. But after talking with Attorney General's office, our policy folks, we didn't do that. So it's something we'll work with the subsidy team. If there's another way subsidy regs can be changed, or just figuring out how to help families, but doing it through a regulation was not deemed the best approach. Third one down, authority of superintendent and information requested to determine qualifications for licensure. So we did add some language to clarify that, and that's what we'll go through in detail, some of that clarifying language as we go through. Next one, functional design requirements. We did not change anything relating to that because most of the functional design has to do with building codes, and we always have to defer to building officials on that. The next area of concern from the public comments was allowable variance, approval, and compliance. So we did revise some of the language to allow the superintendent or designee, because most of this is at my level, how to approve or not approve allowable variances. So language has changed to allow me more ability to do allowable variances. And the best example is for those who remember EPICAC and activated charcoal many years ago. There was a whole bunch of stuff about regulations required it, but you couldn't buy it. And we're at a dilemma because there's no way I could waive that regulation. So we got a little bit more wiggle room to do those kinds of things with the language that is there, but just tweaking the language. Next, please. So top one, authority of superintendent and determining qualifications for license renewal. There's no change there because DOE is responsible for deciding what those requirements are. Second one down, 120, authority of superintendent to ensure refuse or renew a license. A lot of this had to do with some language regarding what is an order. Usually we say a special order or final order. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Fees for licensure, we did not change that. We have to have a fee requirement. So that's been moved into the document. So no change there. The next one, and background check requirements and need for multiple checks, including out of state. We did not change that because most of that is either federal or state requirements. So we did not go in to do any changes, even though that was requested. Next.
And I would also, just as a note there, I know I've heard from some of you about concerns around timeliness of background checks, and that is unfortunately not covered through these regulations. So that's a little bit of also what happens is people are expressing what it could be some concerns with how things currently function, and we don't disagree with those comments, but in terms of what we're actually able to do through the regulations, it's not something we can fix through this.
So just a little aside, I'm going to sow this seed because I do have verbal confirmation from DSS that they are moving towards doing out-of-state checks. So providers will stop having to do out-of-state checks. So just sowing that seed, I have no control over it. Jen and I are doing everything we can to water the seeds over it, DSS to make this happen. But we're committed, and they're committed to moving forward with that. We know that will help everybody with hiring, decreasing stress, decreasing violations. It's just a win-win for everybody.
Is there any discussion on the fee?
There is, yes.
Well, that's crazy because Hawaii is free and Colorado is $30.
Right.
And New York is free.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
all over the map.
So just a little aside, and we can talk more about this at the end. I just want on everybody's time. We are actually working with our federal partners to find out what other states are doing, so we aren't reinventing the wheel. So this is much bigger than just Virginia. So just wanted to let this group know that we're trying to do that. Next, please. Portability and out-of-state background checks. We did clarify some of the language related to this. We'll talk about that. Requirements for maintaining documentation. Again, we provided some clarification, and we'll go through some of these nuances. Posting requirements and use of digital systems. We did not change because part of this is public information must be available to potential families. So there's some privacy as well as some open records requirements there, so we didn't do any change. Review of process and removal of two-stage process and current regulations. So I want to talk about this for a little bit because we talked a lot about modifying this section. Currently, there are 2 stages to review a violation that a provider can exercise. First stage is kind of at a licensing administrator supervisor level. Second stage is at a consultant level. So what has happened since coming over from DSS is we've realized, working with the Attorney General, that there is an APA, Administrative Processing Act, third process that a provider can use to get a violation review. It's called an informal conference. So right now, the way it is, there's a three-step process. We had originally, when we wrote this regulation, had written it as one process. And some providers said, we really like that two-part process. So we do have that now. That was not part of this original one. So we were originally thinking about putting back in that two-step process, but that will be a substantive change and will regenerate this whole process of review. We felt that because the process that was asked for was an outside review, and actually through the Administrative Process Act, that actually is given. So it's kind of a default now that we did not realize. So because of that, we're not doing a change to the review process for violations because there's still a two-step process that's built into the Administrative Process Act. So we did not change that section. And then
one of the points there too, and we've been talking about how to make this understandable, but so there are places where it's not here because it doesn't make sense to be here, but it's in someplace else. Talking about maybe creating like a one pager for the field. So like, because from your perspective, you probably care less if it's in this part of the regulation, this part of the code, right? For background checks, you're like, just tell me how background checks work, right? And so I've been working with Jeff and the team around as we finalize this, making it really clear kind of what your steps are if you are seeking kind of additional review, what happens internally, and then what your rights are under APA in terms of that informal review.
Yep.
Jeff, can I ask a quick clarification? So, the review process for an appeal, there's still, like, I guess, just a request for an appeal. But then is there still something that I guess you refer to as a desk review? That's still within DOE?
Yes, yes. So basically the provider will always be encouraged to talk to the inspector supervisor, have a conversation there. If not, then they can do a next request. So that would be official request that'll be done by someone other than the supervisor. If that is not acceptable, then there is the process of going to an administrative conference.
Yeah. Perfect.
And then the last one, the use of the term order. Again, this has to do with negative actions, a final order, a special order. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Next, please. So these are the areas that are impacted. I'm not going to go through this, but basically these are the sections that we'll be talking about over the course of the next several slides. It's pretty much, a good portion of the regulations. We've added some sort of clarifying language in most instances. Next, please. So we've added some definitions. This has to do with our special order and final order. One of the things we always struggle with is if it's a commonly used term, you don't want to redefine it. But we felt and got some guidance from our policy folks that it might be good to put these in the definition section. Next, please. So I'm going to go through these and if you do have a question, please feel free to stop me as we go through.
And just a note, so the changes are in red.
Yep.
So just in terms of like, because I know asking everybody to remember, or in Holly's case, who wasn't here in 2022, would be a gargantuan ask. So it's really just, you'll see how small some of these things are, but in the spirit of transparency, wanting to put it out there.
Right. So yeah, and the strike through red is what we're striking through, and the red without the strike through is what's added. So here in some definitions, we've just added some technical clarifications. Next, please. Again, technical edits for the qualifications for licensure. So part of this also is there is a style guide for writing regulations, which is different than the style guide used by DOE for writing other things. So one of the things I specifically struggle with is like, okay, which style are we kind of using here? So some of this is just kind of making things match the regulatory style manual. Section 40 for qualifications for licensure. We've added some information that we are requiring as part of the application process, not just assuming people know what that is. One of the things that we do is a license shall not be issued to an applicant who does not constitute or does not operate or maintain. So one of the things that we're finding is some people will hold licenses, especially family data home system licenses, for years and years and years without ever serving any children, families, or anything else. And it just makes it difficult for us to determine compliance. Part of what we to do is we're going to renew your license because you've shown that you've met these compliance things. And so just clarifying some things to kind of help us, not that we're going to revoke someone's license, but as soon as they have children or something, then we can reissue the license really, really easily with that. Section 50, building and functional designs. The health authorities do not have the ability to approve something, but they can inspect it. And then we do ask for certain things to meet functional design requirements before we approve the license. So it gives us a little bit of ability to make sure providers are where they need to be before we issue the license. Next, please. So variances. So this is where I was talking about the issue of EPICAC and activated charcoal. Just adding the language demonstration of hardship allows us to be a little bit more proactive in encouraging a provider to seek an allowable variance. Because it's always been at the request of a provider. Now we're working to try to make things a little easier. Some language changes, instead of saying prior to, we're using before, and approve for the requested variance, and shall, using a may instead of shall. That can always get us in trouble. Next, please. So one of the things that gets us in a little bit of a quandary is when a child care provider has a conditional license, but they just aren't quite ready to fly on their own. In the past, we had no other option but to deny the conditional. The problem that creates is if we deny it, they cannot reapply for 6 months. So we needed to find something that was a little bit of a wiggle room. For some examples, they might not have any children yet, and they've just been trying to get children, haven't been able to. So we now have the ability to issue a provisional license right after a conditional license, which we did not have the ability to do previously. And then the next section 120 has to do with a special order or final order issued by the superintendent. So some clarifying language there. Next, please. Out-of-state background checks, instead of trying to say child abuse and neglect and criminal history, just background checks, because that covers both. And then we talk about in the bottom section there, for any component of the background check. And then person responsible for obtaining the background check. So just some clarifying language. Some of this is clarifying from a knowledge standpoint. Some of this is clarifying from a legal standpoint. So you're like, well, why did you have to do that? It was just to kind of tighten things up from a legal perspective.
It also helps make some of this more evergreen in case, like one state changes slightly how they do this, right? Or there's a change at the federal level. Removing some of that specificity actually enables this to be less burdensome in the future.
So, slide 9, out-of-state background checks. Again, just adding some clarifying language, documentation from the state or from the state on or after the date requested from the state. So again, giving us a little bit more flexibility, giving things a little bit more clarity. And so just one little aside, the majority of background check requirements are in the code. This is what we're using to fill in some of those gaps, kind of put the mortar on some of the bricks so we can operationalize this down in the level.
And as a reminder there, much of what is in the Virginia code is very explicitly spelled out by the Child Care and Development federal law. So this is not a place where there's a lot of discretion as compared to other parts of that federal law.
And just a reminder, this is why needing to get the provisional hire in code was so important, because we needed the code to supersede the reg and also have the code, Virginia code, match federal requirements. Push there. Next, please. So section 210, having to do the maintenance of background check records. It is a requirement that an individual required to have background checks terminate duties within a facility no longer resides in the home. So we needed to clarify just the information related to family day homes specifically. And so we needed to add that here, changing the word such to the records. Next, please. So prohibited acts, basically just trying to, again, bring some clarity, take things. In general, we like to use bullets versus long paragraphs of narratives, just makes it easier to follow people don't get lost. So you'll just more of a style clarification. And then the section 14 having to do with special or final order, just clarifying that is both types of order, not one or the other. Next, please. Here's the title edited, so revocation and denial, to make sure that it's understood that this, because those are two very distinct things. Just a little aside. So when we deny a license, it is a provider's responsibility to prove that we are wrong in not renewing it. There's a legal argument. When we revoke a license, it's our job to prove to the court that they should no longer have it. So it's kind of important that when we write our regulations, if it is going to apply to both denials and renewals, we need to be kind of specific in how we say that. So that's part of the thought process that kind of goes into some of this as well. Next, please. Consent agreement. So consent agreement is a really, really valuable tool because it is the department's goal to have as many childcare providers, safe, quality childcare providers open as possible. At a minimum, they have to be as safe as possible. When we go for a revocation or denial, that terminates a license, and it'll terminate for a minimum of 6 months. There are times when a provider, quote unquote, comes to their senses and gets their act straight at the last minute. A consent agreement allows us to say, yes, we will allow you to keep your license. However, there's no more grace. You screw up, you're done. So consent agreements are a really, really great tool to kind of help us ensure as many childcare providers stay open as possible, but also keeping our, hey, you've gotten to the end of your rope and that you can't go any further to keep things healthy and safe. That is a great tool also to help us with other types of negative actions. Whether it be contact parents or probations, because it also shortens the appeal process. Most appeals are going to be at least 6 months. Doing a consent agreement, we can kind of work things out and have 2 months and then things are better, or 2 months and things get worse and we can stop things. So this allows us the ability to do a little bit more with consent agreements than we were in the past.
And I think this is important too. Often what bubbles up here, situations where I think we would attribute it to a hire who didn't meet expectations and acted in a really inappropriate way. And so systematically, the provider will say, we have, terminated that individual or individuals. The consent agreement is a nice middle ground on saying, okay, we get you, but sort of also say, what systematically are you going to do to make sure that you don't have any other hires like that? And I will say the vast majority of our, more egregious situations involve, 1 or 2 people that are terminated. And really the consent agreement is the way in which we say, okay, well, we also need you to think systematically about how do you not get in this place again.
And so the last part of that, removing the language that regulates the department, this forced our hand when a provider might be doing wonderfully well. Now they've gotten new staff, they've got new director, new management, the signs out front, they're doing great. Well, this would say, well, we still got to come in and monitor you just like we did before. And we're like, hey, that's just not fair for anybody. We want to do inspections based on risk. We don't see the same risk, so that we remove that section from the consent agreement section. Next, please. So 330 appeals of refusal to issue a license. So just kind of cleaning up some of the language. And then the last part is having language that matches what is actually in, that was language that came from the code, right?
And we actually just moved this information up from subsection C.
Gotcha. Right. Yep. So this was just a move, again, trying to do flow and keeping things tight with that. Next, please. Well, actually, before we do this, questions about those changes?
Jeff, I have 2 quick ones. One, licensing fees have been waived since COVID.
Yes.
That's sunsetting. When is
Yes.
that date?
I think we have that as next summer. Yeah, June 2026.
Okay. And then the other thing, and in all fairness, I have already spoken with Jeff about this. I think he and I have a good understanding, but I want to share this with Jack also. There's a concern from childcare centers on the posting of violations on the internet and the time. What happens, and Jeff, you can decide whether you want to get into the technology behind this or not, but what's currently happening is if a center receives a violation that is posted on the internet for public view, the center is given an opportunity to provide a response. And a lot of times the center's response, perhaps for the public, gives a better understanding of what occurred at that day, at that time, at that moment, and why this violation occurred. The state doesn't have the ability to do that. The state has to, hey, this is the violation. This is what we saw. This is what happened. That's it. It's so important. Centers believe, and I agree, that centers have that opportunity to post their response. What did you do? Why did it happen? How did it happen? What'd you do to fix it? How can you give some comfort that it's not going to happen again? That's all in the response part of it. But what's currently happening is the response is not posted the same day as the violation. So if you're a parent and you're searching and you see Riversbend Children's Center and you say, oh my gosh, they did what? Unless you train yourself to go back sometimes up to 5 days later and read that same posting again, you may have gone on to the next school on your list. And the Child Care Association strongly believes that these postings need to go at the same time. The violation posted at the same time as the response. So when the public is viewing this, they've got the whole picture in front of them at one time. Don't have to come back later to see, oh, well, what did they ever say about that? Hopefully they do that, but how do we know that they actually do? So that's a request from the centers. But I think there's some technology issues right now that hidden.
Yep, yes. So if anybody needs me to go into the technology, I can. If you want to do it after this is over, I can do that too. So just let me know from that standpoint, because again, part of this is transparency. You know, again, part of it, as the department wants to model it, the department also wants to enable it with providers, things like that.
It is important to know, it's both a technology issue, but we also have a timeliness obligation under law to publish the inspection findings. They're already not posted immediately upon completing the inspection. So there's only so long that we're even able to wait under federal law in posting those inspection results.
And in all fairness, your hands are probably tied based on the speed in which you receive that response.
Yeah, I mean, it does make me think if there's a way so part of what happens is you've got things that run the gamut, right? Where you have people who have minor deficiencies who really do want to make sure, and they, in a timely session and often very professionally written, give us a response. On the flip side, I get the calls, right, when the child escapes the center and they're like, where is that report? As has happened in this region a couple of times. And folks are really upset that you're hearing from WVIR or whatever instead of, on the state website, right? So we're trying to thread the needle. I think we could take a look at some of the language around kind of whether it's encouraging you to come back or sort of saying that, or kind of, right?
Response will be posted.
Response will be posted, because I think I agree. We ultimately want the same thing, which is that if you give us a response, we want it right there. So you have the totality of information, kind of key to your point earlier about what parents can access. On the flip side, I would say some of our providers who've had our most egregious offenses are also would love a reason for those not to be posted for 5 or 10 more days. And so trying to think through how do we balance that? But I think we can certainly most immediately address that language and help parents understand that if this is relatively new, come back in X amount of time and check that to do that while also exploring how to get those up as fast as possible. But we're hearing it on both ends from families.
So I do want to just talk about technology for 2 seconds from where we were to where we're going. So for those who've been around long enough, the originals, when Dolphin came on board, inspectors were walking around with laptops. At the end of the inspection, they would sit down with the provider and say, what's your plan of correction? They go back, everything's synced at once. So migrate into, COVID, when we're sending violations and getting them back, the gap started to grow. Now that we don't use the computers in the facility, trying to be in and out, and the inspectors will send emails, that gap has continued to grow. The implementation that we're working now for our new system is that when an inspection is done, the provider can go into the portal and immediately do the information. So there's no back and forth between emails and stuff. It can actually be done pretty much as soon as the inspector's done, the provider can be able to do it. So just to let you know, we hear you, we're working towards things, but in all honesty, we're still years out from that. Just because of where we are with the technology. Yeah, with that. So just in terms of time, I do want to kind of talk about what's next. So following endorsement here, it'll go back to the board for review. Once the board kind of approves it, then I'll just do one final run through the Attorney General. That's where if they said, oh my gosh, this is a big change, that would dictate it going through more formal review. But based on what is given here, where we believe they'll say, check, yes. They'll go to planning and budget, nothing's really changed, check, yes. They'll go back to the Secretary of Governor, check, yes. Then it'll go out for a final 30-day public review. That is just about its implementation. Our policy person says kind of like a Hail Mary pass for providers. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing since sliced bread, and the governor gets 10,000 of those, you guarantee it's not going to go anywhere. So it's kind of that one last pass. Once that's done, then we get to say when it goes into effect. And so our goal will always be to give at least 3 months. You know, that gives us time to have trainings within that first month. We'll do kind of a dog and pony show like I and the associate directors did back in 2021. We'll go back, we'll do trainings, we'll do webinars, we'll send out memos, with various connections so that everybody will be ready when it becomes effective. However, this isn't going to be hardly a big lift at all for providers because most of this is administrative stuff. So it's not going to be this big shock that it won't be as big a deal as when the Child Day Center regulations come out. Questions about that? And if there's not, then I'll defer to Jenna, I guess, to defer to approvals.
Okay, further discussion, any questions? Do we have a motion to adopt general procedures, licensure, and background checks?
And if you vote yes, I won't stand up and dance even though I want to.
Official motion is to endorse.
The motion is to endorse.
I move that we endorse them as presented today.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Excellent, wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Those are probably being recorded, I would think.
Okay, so before Clark seeks a motion to adjourn, Becca and Chelsea, is there anything this body needs to know about applications? Anything else in terms of around the various pages we talked about last month?
Yeah, so we have received all applications. So thanks to those of you that are interested in serving another term and got your applications in. We are going through all of the applications that we've received. And hopefully we'll be in touch around next steps at some point in May. So these are the nominations will go to the board for their review and approval in the May meeting. So more information to come there, but anyone that is currently sitting on the committee, the term expiration is at the end of June. So we have one more meeting before the end of the current terms. June 26th. So more information to come on that front. We'll also note that we'll be in touch via email after the meeting around travel reimbursements, which we'll have lots of this time around. We may also need to ask folks to send us information again about the March meeting, but we'll follow up with more information and details on that over email.
Good, thanks, Rebecca. Excellent meeting today. I feel like we really accomplished something as the EPAC body, so thanks for everyone's attendance today. Any other discussion? I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make that.
I will second it. Adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Easter weekend.
Bye-bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Have a good one.